Right, hi guys again. This is the third video that I've said about the trilogy to do with the FTP test. Now, obviously I've done the test. Hopefully by now, if you're watching this video, you've actually seen the second one of me doing the test. And the idea behind this video is for me to go through some of the stuff that was involved in the test, explain a few things about it. And obviously I've also included a lot of information underneath the video. In terms of the test results will be underneath this video. I've included some data for you to read up on and have a look at, and also a link to the actual test itself, so you can go and have a look at the test results that's actually up on the Wattbike hub and draw your own conclusions. So this video, the idea behind it is basically me going through a few points that I wanted to explain. And also you'll notice on the board behind me here that I've given some examples of some power to weight ratios, and the reason I've written it out is basically because I can't remember all of the figures off the top of my head. So I've done some examples which I've prepared, and I'll talk through that. Obviously I'm not going to hang around in you today because I don't know if you can see from the thermostat behind me here, but it's only 3.5 degrees now, and hence the reason why I've got this coat on. It's not particularly warm. Okay, so what do I want to talk about in this video? Well, points for discussion is to do with the FTP test, and in particular things like the time splits. Now I think I mentioned that the way I normally do these tests is what I would call through front loading, and that's exactly how the test that was carried out has been done. And you'll notice, if you watch the video carefully, you'll see that the first 20k I went through literally about 1 minute quicker than what I'd done the second 20k. Slightly by design, a little bit by luck as well, I must admit. But the comments I've made underneath this video, you'll see that as far as I was concerned, I think that was a pretty good test overall. You know, I mean, as far as the time I spent in the threshold sort of zone and the VO2 max was pretty much on the money. Could I have worked a little bit harder? Possibly, and this is why I mentioned about the UTS, which I didn't have in place, obviously, because I was doing this on my own. So yeah, overall reasonably happy. A little bit dissatisfied with my pedaling efficiency score, but I mean, in fairness to myself, and I think that's probably going to be true for most of you, as you fatigue, these type of things, you know, they just get worse. I mean, it started off very good, and then obviously as the time went on, it got to be quite bad towards the end, but you know, that's one of the things you've got to live with. So now in terms of the power to weight ratio thing, I mean, I keep banging on about this, I know, so I am going to explain this in a minute, and hence the reason that's all behind you. I mean, overall at the end of the test I'd done 3.36 watts per kilo, which for me was a reasonably good result. As I said, I'd done an earlier one you know, beforehand, like in the week, which I hadn't managed to record for hardware failures, and hence the reason, you know, my second one of the week, it's not too bad. I was reasonably happy with that. The cadence, which is like how fast you pedal, again, it didn't really vary that much from the start through to the finish. So I know some people might think, well, possibly towards the end it was looking a little bit lower than what possibly a lot of other people would recommend, and I'm not saying I disagree with that. I mean, I think it depends on you know, whether you're a person that likes to cycle with a high cadence and you know, a lower gear on a road bike, or whether you like to sit in a higher gear with a lower cadence. Well, I'm probably the second of those. You know, I mean, I find that trying to maintain a much higher cadence, actually to me, it is more fatiguing than sticking with a lower cadence and a higher resistance, or higher gear if you like. Now the leg balance, as far as that test result went, I mean, bearing in mind that when you're doing a threshold test, you are, you know, really working hard, and it's the same with any sport, whether it be swimming, running, cycling. You know, the more you push yourself, when fatigue sort of sets in, these type of errors generally occur. You know, it's like swimming, for example. I mean, if you put somebody who's even a world-class swimmer into one of these swim tanks, where they basically test them and they put the speed, you know, the water speed up faster, and they have to try and keep up with that current effectively, their stroke will break down after a while. And you know, it's with these tests, I mean, that's what happened basically. I mean, I could do drill work and possibly keep a 50-50 leg balance, you know, when I'm not really working that hard. But when you're really trying to push hard, that's where these type of things come in. But there's something that I'm going to work on, you know. So, you know, as far as if you do one of these tests and you find you've got similar problems, then you just have to do drill work, you know. And this is what I think I've explained in the very first video I've done, not the first of the trilogy, but the first video I did about load balancing errors, and that's what I was talking about. And as far as how hard was I working, well, again, I've made a note on the bottom of this video about like my maximum threshold heart rate is round about 160. So for me to be working at 154 as an average heart rate all the way through that test, I think is pretty good. You know, as I said, maybe with UTS in place, I could have potentially gone a little bit harder. And you know, maybe I will next time, I don't know, but we'll see. So overall, I'm reasonably happy. Now, the other thing that come out of this test result, I mentioned before, I think it was in the second video, about Wattbike and this 20-minute FTP test. Now, when I've been reading up on this in the past, Wattbike have suggested that this 20-minute FTP test, if you work as hard as you can for 20 minutes, get your how many watts you can maintain after 20 minutes, and take that figure, divide it by 100, times it by 95, and it will give you a general sort of ballpark figure as to what they'd expect you to do if you'd done the test for an hour. Now, based on the results that I've just got out of this, I would have to say that 95% is possibly a bit on the optimistic side. I would think that more likely somebody who does a 20-minute test should probably take that result and divide it by 100 and times it by 90. If you're like an endurance type cyclist, and if you're probably a sprinter, then probably less than 90. I don't know what that would be, but I just think that, you know, to say that you can do, you know, what you're doing in 20 minutes, you'll be able to do 95% of that over an hour, I think is a little bit optimistic, to be honest. And I think, you know, people might be misled if they do these 20-minute tests, thinking, oh, well, my FTP is that, you know, but it's absolutely not. Well, I don't think so anyway. I mean, I'm willing to be proved wrong if people have got enough data to prove otherwise, but it's just something to bear in mind. Now, also, I mentioned before about the speed and everything on these Wattbikes for people that are different weights and that, and I think I just want to recap that if you're, you know, like with me, when I did this test the other day, I was 70 kilos, and the time I did was 1 hour, 1 minute and 7 seconds. Now, what I'm saying is, Wattbike calculated that speed based on the power that I was putting through and the fact that I would have been 75 kilos. So the fact that I'm under 75 kilos, in fact by 5 kilograms at the time, means that in reality, if I was on a road bike, I could potentially do a bit quicker, shall we say, than what the 1 hour, 1 minute and 7 seconds would be. But equally, if I was a different weight and say I was heavier, then this time would be a little bit, you know, overstated. You know, in reality, if I was out on a road bike and I was weighing 80 kilos, for example, the chances are that with the amount of watts I was putting through, or if I was putting through that amount of watts through the pedals on a road bike, it wouldn't get me through 40k in the time that I actually did. So that's something just to bear in mind. Now, another thing, again, I'm slightly being a bit of a hypocrite here, because I would say that, you know, when you're doing an FTP test, if you're doing an hour test, then realistically you should stop after 1 hour. And the reason for that being is, again, with these Wattbikes, that if you're someone who's very light, you know, you could be fitter than I am and very light, but because you're not putting through that same amount of watts, even though your power to weight ratio is higher, you could end up, you know, going on for maybe an hour and 5, hour and 10, and if you're not very fit, you could go on for an hour and 20 before you get through 40k. Now, obviously, then if you're going for over the hour, then you're going to fatigue even more. So your FTP value is actually going to drop with time. So, you know, unless you're going to bring it in pretty much on the hour, which is why I actually continued on for 1 hour. I knew that I was going to get pretty close to the hour, and going over by a minute and 7 seconds, I don't really think affected my result in any way, you know. As you probably see from the video, I sort of beasted it a bit again anyway, so, you know, I felt reasonably comfortable in doing that. So just to bear in mind that, you know, if everybody wants to go like for like, you should all just stop at the 60 minutes. And if you get through 40k quicker than an hour on one of these bikes, then probably you should continue on for the hour, just to see if you how much power you can maintain for that exact hour, and that will give you an accurate FTP result. Okay, so that's that. Now on this screen over here, hopefully you can see it. This is what I was talking about when I'm talking about power to weight ratio. Now, why is power to weight ratio relevant? Well, in gyms these days, I've seen like on these screens, you know, they have them on the wall, and you've got several riders, and one of the displays they have up is the amount of power that people are doing in watts. Now, let's say, for example, we're sitting in a gym, and we've got 5 different bikes all lined up, and different people with different weights. We've got one person who's 52 kilos on a bike, another person who's 64, another person who's 70 kilos, another one 75, and another one who's 85 kilos, for example. Now, on this screen, if we've got all the dials showing up in watts, and everybody's putting through 250 watts, they all probably think, well, if we went out on the road bike, we're all probably about the same level of fitness. Well, actually that is completely wrong, and this is what a lot of people fail to understand. It's literally power to weight that is crucial here. Now, why is that? Okay, well, if we take the first cyclist who's 52 kilos and he's putting through 250 watts, if we divide that 250 watts by the amount of kilos of weight that they're actually pulling along on that bike if they were on the road, their power to weight ratio comes out at 4.81 watts per kilo, which, I mean, is not bad. I mean, you're not going to win the Tour de France, or, you know, with that, you know, realistically, you're going to be up at 7 watts per kilo to be doing that type of thing. But 4.81 watts per kilo, you're a pretty good cyclist, you know, and I wouldn't want to meet you on the road right now if you can do that. If someone's 64 kilograms and they're still putting through 250 watts, bear in mind, if we're putting this up, people think, oh, they're all doing the same, then their power to weight ratio is only going to be 3.91 watts per kilo, which again is still pretty good. You know, you'd still be probably a little bit better than what certain cycling clubs are stating an amateur cyclist would be. I think it's about 3.4 to 3.7 watts per kilo is going to put you or class you as being an amateur cyclist. The 70 kilogram one, now again, 250 divided by 70 is going to give us 3.57 watts per kilo, which is getting closer probably to where I am at the moment. I'm not quite there at this moment in time, but, you know, that's sort of ballpark I'm in. 75 kilogram cyclist, 250 watts is going to give us 3.3 watts per kilo. Now, I've realised I've highlighted that in red there, and the reason being is that if you're a 75 kilo cyclist on these watt bikes, the speed is going to be probably reasonably close to what you would actually do on the road bike. So, you know, the time that you're going to pick up off of here might not be too far out with what you could actually do on a time trial on a road bike, depending on the course, of course, you know, and depending on the wind resistance. There are quite a lot of factors like that, and the temperature on the day as well. But on the last one, the 85 kilo cyclist, again, still putting through just 250 watts, is only going to be doing 2.94 watts per kilo. So you can see the amount of difference there is in terms of the power. You know, I mean, it's a bit like having 2 cars where one's got a big engine. The body might be the same size, but if one's got a little engine and one's got a big engine, you know full well the one that's got the big engine is going to have a hell of a lot more acceleration, a lot more power. And it's pretty much the same with this. You know, this one here, 4.8 watts per kilo compared to that one down there, the difference is absolutely going to be vast. And, you know, what I'm saying from this is that if someone tells me what their power to weight ratio is, I can straight away think to myself, well, if I was out on the road with them, I'd know whether I'm going to be in a bit of trouble or whether they're going to have trouble keeping up with me or not, you know. And I'm saying, like, if I was going out with someone who I knew was doing 4.8 watts per kilo, well, to be totally honest with you, I probably wouldn't want to go out with them, actually, because I know I'm going to get like completely beasted, and if they come to a hill, they would just drop me. There's no way I could keep up with that. So I think that's probably everything I want to cover here today. As I said, I have put notes underneath the video. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video of me, like so, working, and it should give you an idea that if you're doing an FTP test, how hard you really need to be working. And I mean, you know, potentially you could even go a little bit harder if you're used to doing these tests. And you know, myself, I think I've still got a little bit more to give. So if I get a better result and I've recorded it, obviously I'll put the video up. But if you want to follow us, you can follow us on the Wattbike Hub under Beastmaster. And say links to the tests I've done I will potentially post either on Facebook or maybe even Instagram, I don't know yet, but definitely on Facebook. Alright, that's it then guys, thank you, bye.